This is one of my favourite last stand stories. A lone Viking stands firm on a narrow bridge, his axe gripped tightly in his hand. Ahead, the English army surge, their shouts rising as they close in. Behind him, with the surprise arrival of the English, his comrades scramble to form into a shield wall. As the first soldier stepped onto the bridge, the Viking's roar cut through the air, and his axe swung down, marking the beginning of a legendary last stand that would echo throughout history. This is the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The Battle of Stamford Bridge, fought on September 25th, 1066, marked a dramatic and bloody moment in Viking and English history. This clash, occurring only weeks before the Battle of Hastings, was a crucial point in the Viking incursions into England and signalled the end of the Viking Age. The battle was fought between the forces of King Harald Godwinson of England and an invading Viking army led by King Harald Hardrada of Norway. While the battle itself was monumental, it was the image of a lone Viking warrior holding the narrow bridge in a desperate last stand that remains one of the most famous moments of the encounter. The events leading to Stamford Bridge begin with Harald Hardrada's ambition to claim the English throne. Hardrada, known as one of the last great Viking kings, believed he had claimed to the throne through previous Norse rulers who attempted to establish dominance over England. He joined forces with Totsig, Harald Godwinson's brother, who had been exiled from England and sought to regain his former power and lands. Together, they assembled a fleet of around 300 ships and set sail for the north of England, landing near the River Humber. The Viking force, likely numbering between 7,000 and 9,000 warriors, first met and defeated the local English forces at the Battle of Fulford on September 20th, just outside the city of York. This victory allowed Hardrada to secure control over York and negotiate supplies and hostages, effectively establishing a temporary foothold in England. Believing they had time before any significant English response, the Vikings camped near Stamford Bridge and rested. Meanwhile, Harald Godwinson, King of England, was rallying his force in the south, preparing for an imminent Norman invasion from William of Normandy. News of the Viking landing in the north forced Harald into a grueling forced march. Gathering an army of housecarls, his elite soldiers and local levies, Harald covered nearly 200 miles from London to York in just 4 days, a feat that speaks to both his determination and the discipline of his forces. The Vikings were not expecting such a quick response and were taken by surprise when Harald's army arrived on the morning of September 25th. The English forces, estimating around 15,000 men, vastly outnumbered the Vikings, and the Vikings left much of their armour and weaponry at the ships because they weren't expecting any army to arrive. Hardrada's men were resting and unprepared for a full-scale battle. As the English approached Stamford Bridge, the Viking forces scrambled to form a defensive line on the eastern bank of the River Derwent. The bridge itself was narrow and only a few men could pass through at the time. This choke point became a crucial location in the ensuing battle. As the English army pressed forward, it quickly became apparent that crossing the narrow bridge would be challenging, as one lone Viking warrior had taken a position on the bridge and stood ready to defend it. His identity remains unknown, and some historians question whether he was a berserker, a type of Viking warrior reputed for ferocity and unbreakable resolve, or simply a skilled fighter. Nevertheless, this lone Viking's last stand would enter into legend. According to accounts, this Viking warrior held the bridge with almost superhuman strength, single-handedly preventing the English from crossing. His weapon of choice was a large battle axe, which he wielded with deadly precision, cutting down any English soldier who dared approach. The narrowness of the bridge meant that Harald's men could only engage him in one or two at a time, allowing him to use the limited space to his advantage. English soldiers attempted to rush him, but each one fell under his brutal onslaught. This standoff delayed the English advance significantly, giving Hardrada's forces on the other side of the bridge precious time to form a defensive line and attempt to regroup. Eyewitnesses and chroniclers described the Vikings' defense as almost mythical. The accounts, though recorded years later and possibly romanticized, paint a vivid picture of his stubborn resistance. He's said to have killed over 40 English soldiers, holding the bridge for a substantial part of the morning while his comrades prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The English grew increasingly frustrated with their inability to break through, realizing that they would not be able to engage the main Viking force until the bridge was cleared. Ultimately, however, no amount of bravery could stop the inevitable. Recognizing that conventional attacks were ineffective, one English soldier reportedly floated himself onto the bridge in a half barrel or boat and used a spear to stab upward between the wooden slats of the bridge, mortally wounding the lone soldier from below. With their fierce defender finally defeated, the English surged across the bridge, setting the stage for the larger, bloody clash that would follow on the other side of the river. Once the bridge was cleared, the full force of Harold's army advanced, and the main battle commenced in earnest. The Vikings, although valiant, were poorly equipped compared to the heavily armoured and organised English forces. Without the element of surprise or the usual tactical advantages, Hardrada's forces found themselves outmatched. Harald Hardrada himself fought fiercely until he took an arrow to the throat, a blow that signalled the beginning of the end for the Viking forces. Godwinson's brother, Tostig, also fell in battle, further demoralising the Norsemen. The Vikings were pushed back with heavy casualties, the line breaking as they attempted to retreat. Only a small fraction of the original invasion force made it back to their ships, and it is said of the 300 ships that brought them to England, only around 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. The defeat at Stamford Bridge marked the end of Viking attempts to conquer England, closing a chapter of Norse incursions that had persisted for centuries. If you want to hear about how cats were used to win a battle, check out this video. And if you've liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Such small actions can really help smaller and newer channels like mine. See you next time.